Hey there, this is Al Mack from Spark Sports, and we are breaking down this Wednesday night's main event for ONE Championship on TNT, featuring the former UFC Flyweight champion Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson as he takes on Adriano Moraes for the ONE Championship MMA Men's Flyweight Gold. This all goes down Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern. You can watch it on TNT in America, on YouTube in Canada, a whole lot of other places, as well as on the ONE Super app. So let's break this down. But before we do that, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and you can follow along with the betting breakdown on SparkSports.ca. And we're going to be breaking down a ton of fights. We'll have a ton of sports betting content, UFC, Bellator, ONE FC, Ryzen, a little bit of boxing, sports from all around the globe. I got nothing but time on my hands right now. So we're going to be covering a ton of sports and a ton of MMA. So let's get started. Demetrious Johnson comes in as the minus 790 favorite against Adriano Moraes, who's on plus 480 on the comeback. And that's pretty wild. You can get him like plus 660 at offshores, places like that. But we're using the average global odds via oddsportal.com. And that's what we're calling it. Plus 480 on Moraes, minus 795 on Johnson. And then the total is very hard to find. There's only about one outlet that had the total. Over 2.5 rounds, minus 255, under 2.5 rounds, plus 168. And again, Wednesday, April 7th, 10 p.m. Eastern on TNT and on YouTube and the ONE Super app. So let's break this down. Adriano Moraes comes into this. This is his 8th ONE Championship title bout. He holds a 9-3 record in the promotion since making his debut back in 2013. He had a 22-1 record. Moraes did before winning the ONE Flyweight Championship in 2014 against Gehi Estequejo. He won the title via unanimous decision in that bout. Moraes is interesting. He's lost the title twice in his reign as champion, regaining the belt on 2 separate occasions, making him the only 3-time champion in ONE Championship history, and I think the only 3-time flyweight champion in MMA. This is the type of guy Moraes is. He advances his skills even after reaching the peak of his ability. After winning the title in 2014, he traveled to the United States. He competed in a handful of BJJ tournaments. He won the New York BJJ Open and then the 2014 Naga No-Gi Black Belt Division Championship. And then Moraes moved to America in 2015. He joined American Top Team in South Florida. He trains with guys like Jorge Masvidal, Pedro Munoz. This guy, he's super high level. He's a high level grappler, high level jiu-jitsu player, and he has improved significantly in his stand-up, which we saw he put on display in the trilogy bout against Gehi Estequejo back in January of 2019. However, ultimately, it was his ground game in that fight that stunned the crowd and stunned the judges. So let's take a look at that. The Sulov stretch. One of the most devastating submissions I've ever seen, and it's just absolutely miraculous that Estequejo didn't tap, and it's absolutely miraculous that he got out of this hold. And the Sulov stretch, it's kind of like a knee bar, hip twister, just a wild high-level submission, and Moraes caught him in the 4th round in their fight, in their trilogy bout. And yeah, Estequejo miraculously escaped after almost a full minute in this hold. The Sulov stretch, just wild. First used by the UFC, the Russian UFC and Pride fighter, Amar Suluev. And, this is an extremely difficult hold to put on someone, and it's extremely difficult to maneuver out of. Yeah, Estequejo somehow, got out of what looked like one of the most painful submissions you'll ever see in this sport. But yeah, man, Moraes, an elite level get up game, very dangerous in scrambles. On the mat, he has the ability to pull off sweeps, reversals. He's a high risk, high reward type wrestler, very high pace. And this specific skill set that he has makes him very interesting in a matchup against Mighty Mouse, who's also known for being an elusive wrestler with his ability to escape vulnerable positions, with slick scrambling and high pace wrestling. And so this will be a very entertaining matchup if this fight ends up on the ground. And then another factor that needs to be talked about is Moraes is going to have a 5-inch height advantage here over Mighty Mouse, which is not exactly a massive factor for Johnson, who's fought bigger opponents almost his entire career because, you know, the guy's very small. But there's something to be said about Moraes being probably the biggest guy that Johnson has ever faced. And we've heard him talk about it. We've heard him talk about, you know, the guys in the bantamweight division are longer, legs are longer, arms are longer, and you know, it's different at 135 pounds. Okay, let's talk about Demetrious Johnson. He comes in to this 3-0 in ONE Championship after going 15-2-1 in the UFC. In his last 14 bouts in the UFC, he won 7 by stoppage, 6 by decision, and lost his final fight in the promotion by decision. A loss to Henry Cejudo, which was just his second loss in the UFC in 7 years. So then after dropping that his UFC flyweight gold, he was traded to ONE Championship for Ben Askren, which is just wild stuff if you look at the trajectories of their two careers after this trade. And so yeah, Johnson immediately entered the ONE Championship Flyweight Grand Prix. He went 3-0 in that tournament. He earned himself this title shot for this fight that we're talking about right now. In the first fight of the tournament, Johnson faced Yuya Wakamatsu. Competitive first round, but Johnson finished the fight 2 minutes and 40 seconds into the second round with a guillotine choke. In the second round of the tournament, this was an interesting one. He faced Tatsumitsu Wada. Yet, you know, another competitive matchup. This one was in a ring, which was very interesting. And Johnson picked up the unanimous decision, but there was some points in this fight where, you know, he was having some issues with the bigger wrestler and a little bit of foreshadowing, I think. And then in the third and final fight of the tournament, Johnson faced Danny Kingyad, with the winner being crowned as the ONE Championship Flyweight Grand Prix. Johnson took a little bit of damage in this fight. He went toe-to-toe with Kingyad. He got dropped earlier in the second round. And it was Mighty Mouse's defensive wrestling that got him through those dangerous moments in the fight. He was able to eventually take him to the mat, hold that dominant position for the majority of the fight, and he picked up the unanimous decision. One thing that I didn't notice that I picked up in this fight, and it didn't really come to me, you know, I just didn't break down fights the way that I used to when Johnson was tearing up the flyweight division in the UFC, but Mighty Mouse he does an excellent job of mixing up his offense. You know, he uses feints and fakes, and it keeps his opponents guessing. And he'll fake a takedown attempt, and he'll draw a reaction out of his opponent, and then catch his opponent on the off rhythm with an off rhythm shoot when they least expect it. And Mighty Mouse, he's perfected this art of mixing up his striking with his grappling and his striking with his wrestling. And even if his stand-up game, I don't think it's where it once was, but he can still be a very serious problem for Moraes if he manages to land the takedown throughout the fight. But that brings us to a whole other factor, which is Johnson going to want to engage him on the mat because you know, Adriano Moraes is a very elite grappler, especially off the floor. And, a BJJ guy. These guys are good on their back, so it'll be interesting to see how he approaches it. Let's look at the tail of the tape. Demetrious Johnson, 31-1 in his professional career, which is just absolutely ridiculous. This will be his 35th pro fight, and 57% finish rate, 12 wins by submission, 34 years old, which is pretty old for a bantamweight. 5'3", 66-inch reach. And Adriano Moraes, 18-3. We'll talk about those 3 losses in a little bit. 67% finish percentage, 9 wins by submission, 31 years old, 5'8", with his reach not listed. Oh, yeah, okay. This is important. Let's talk about the ONE Championship Flyweight division, okay? This is important. Unlike many other promotions, the ONE Championship Flyweight division is set at 135 pounds, which is a bantamweight weight class, okay? In any other promotion, this would be considered bantamweight. So don't get confused, because it's rather confusing. We heard Demetrious Johnson say he'll never fight at 125 pounds again, and then we see him fighting at flyweight in ONE Championship, but that's because it's 135 pounds. Their whole weight class is shifted up. So Eddie Alvarez is a lightweight. He's actually a welterweight. He's fighting at 170 pounds, but in ONE Championship, that's lightweight. They do have a 125-pound division, and they call it men's strawweight. So it's rather confusing. Yeah, we'll have to get into it deeper, because I don't even know what goes on once we get to heavyweight. But anyways, over the last 2 years, there's been 28 bouts in the ONE men's flyweight division. Of those 28 fights, 20 of them have been won by the betting favorite. However, even with a 20-8 record, the favorite has failed to turn a profit, losing a little over a unit. Meanwhile, a total of those 20 bouts, of those 28 bouts, only 20 of them had total props. So over the past 2 years, of those 28 bouts, the total went 10-10, with both the over and the under failing to turn a profit. So let's look at this here. The favorite, 20-8, 71.4%, minus 1.86 units, a buy price of minus 250, meaning that, if you, based on the betting trend, if you bet only favorites of minus 250 or better, you might have made money. You might have just been on the fringe of making money, but it was a positive EV play. And then with the under's the same thing. You're betting plus money, or you're not betting this play. Based on the betting trend, 10-10 minus 2.93 units. So yeah, you would need to, if you're following this trend, which I don't think you should, because they're both, losing units. You would have to bet the under at plus money for this to be worth your while. Okay, let's get into the betting trends, the individual betting trends for each fighter. Adriano Moraes, 3 of his last 4 fights have gone over the betting total, going 3-4 to the over for plus 1.47 units profit, dating back to 2017. So that means that a $100 bettor who's backed the over in each of his last 4 fights profited $36 per fight, win or lose. Meanwhile, he's 3-1 on the money line in those 4 fights for marginal profit of just 0.21 units. So this is a guy who is rarely the betting underdog, if ever. I'm tracking this. These are the 4 fights that we've had with global odds posted. So with ONE Championship, we haven't seen much betting action over the years, and now it's starting to get more popular. So, he's had 4 fights since 2017 that have global betting odds posted, 4 consecutive fights too. So he's been a favorite in every one of them. This will be the first fight that he will come in as the betting underdog. So now let's talk about the betting trends for Demetrious Johnson. Demetrious Johnson, in his last 17 professional MMA fights, dating back to his rematch victory over Ian McCall, Demetrious Johnson has gone 16-1, turning a moneyline profit of 5.27 units, an ROI of 31% with a $100 better, profiting $31 per fight, win or lose, in those 17 bouts. Meanwhile, Johnson has gone over the betting total in 12 of those 17 fights, going 12-5 for plus 5.22 units profit. Johnson has gone over the betting total in 6 of his last 7 bouts, dating back to his decision victory over Tim Elliott in 2016. He's gone to decision in 3 of his last 4, dating back to his split decision loss to Henry Cejudo. Bettors who have backed both the over and the Mighty Mouse money line in his last 17 fights have gone 28-6 for a profit of plus 10.49 units profit. So that's 16-1 on the money line, plus 5.27 units profit, and then the over 12-5 for 5.22 units profit. So yeah, this guy 16-1. That's 5.27 units isn't the greatest return, but at 16-1, it just depends how much you're betting, right? I always say, don't bet any more than 2.5% of your bankroll. But a guy like this, in his heyday, you were, if you were willing to lay a lot to win a little, you can win a good amount of money. This guy is like the Habib of flyweight at one point in his career. But yeah, here's some intangible factors. Demetrious Johnson, this will be his first 5-round fight since his loss to Cejudo in 2018. And for Moraes, this fight will be his first scheduled for 3 rounds since his 2016 bout against Eugene Tukerho. So this might be a slight edge for Moraes, as Johnson has come out. He comes out with a relatively high pace in his first 3 fights in ONE Championship, and he's going to have to adjust to a more conservative pace in this fight while facing a fighter in Moraes who, he can go at it pedal to the metal for a full 5 rounds. So I feel like that factor favors Moraes. And then both fighters are coming in after a lengthy layoff. Moraes hasn't stepped foot into a cage since January of 2019, and Johnson hasn't seen action since October of 2019. And I think that layoff is a little bit taxing on both fighters, especially these are guys who from 2014 to 2018 managed to compete at least 2 times a year, with sometimes even competing 3 times a year. So I think that might be a factor too here. I'm not exactly sure who it affects more, but I think it's going to be a little bit of an issue, maybe for the first round or whatever, because sometimes, depending on who it is, ring rust does definitely exist. So let's break down the odds. When this line first came out, with Mighty Mouse lined at minus 400, that line swelled quickly to as high as like minus 950 in some places before, some buyback came in and we saw Moraes get some money on him and pushed it back to where it sits now at like minus 790, the average price. And, the immediate reaction for this line movement was that this is now a dog or pass play, right? But, beyond just analyzing the path to victory for both these fighters, there just isn't enough market value on Moraes pulling off the upset at this current price. When you have a chance to be able to get a better line, if you look at the market indicators, there's a better chance of getting a better line closer to fight night. So Demetrious Johnson, hasn't looked spectacular by any stretch in his last 3 appearances in ONE Championship. But nevertheless, this is a guy who is pound for pound one of the best to ever do it. A fighter who has just 3 losses in what will be after Wednesday a 35 fight career. So there's no denying that DJ, he deserves to be the betting favorite. But at what point do you start to look at these odds and see clear value on Moraes regardless of how you look at how you handicap this fight? It hasn't gotten to that point yet, but when it does, regardless of how you think this fight is going to play out, if the betting odds are giving Moraes less of a chance than what any educated person that knows anything about MMA will tell you that he actually has, then the wager is worth making whether you win or you lose, right? If the odds are a lot further apart between these two fighters than what is in reality each of their chances, then, as much as you want to bet Demetrious Johnson, you're betting a priced out line. So it doesn't really matter how you handicap this fight if the line starts to get out of hand, which I think it's going to. It's also worth mentioning that all 3 of Adriano Moraes' losses came by split decision, with 2 of those 3 losses being labeled as outright robberies. Okay, so this is a fighter who he's never lost by stoppage, he's never lost by unanimous decision, and if you consider only 3 of his only 3 losses were on split scorecards, there's some that can argue that Adriano Moraes, he's still undefeated in some people's minds. And with that in mind, don't be surprised to see this one end up turning out to be a close decision, because ultimately I think that favors Mighty Mouse, but that's just how these guys fight. And you look at the betting trends between these two guys, they've gone over the betting total between them 7 of their last 8 combined fights. So while I think it favors Demetrious, the longer this fight goes, I think it favors Demetrious. I think that even if Moraes knows that, he might not necessarily be able to stop it, right? So the way this breaks down is pretty simple. If Moraes can't get this finished early, then DJ should be able to squeeze out the victory, using takedowns as defensive wrestling, grapple heavy, smothering type offense in the later stages of the fight, similar to what DJ was able to do to Danny Kingad. But with that being said, Moraes also faced Danny Kingad and was able to submit him in the first round, which reinforces this point that the longer this fight goes, the more it favors Mighty Mouse. But to get to that point where Mighty Mouse is going to be able to use his ability to stay at range and to play the point fight game, he's going to have to be able to survive the onslaught and the pressure from Moraes for the first few rounds, which, this brings us to the betting total. And it's a classic scenario where the under correlates to one fighter's clearest path to victory. The over correlates to one fighter's clearest path to victory, while the under correlates to the opponent's clearest path to victory. And while there seems to be some juicy plus money value on the under 2.5 rounds at plus 168, both fighters have the tendency to go over the betting total in their recent careers. The under 2.5 rounds, priced at plus 168, based on implied probability, it's about 37% to end within 12.5 minutes. But yet, based on these two fighters' recent betting trends, based on their, the way that their fights have gone as of late, that number seems to be closer to about 30%. About three of 10 times these guys are going to go over 12.5 minutes. And that's like plus 230. And, plus 168 looks juicy, but implied probability versus true odds, you want to have that you want to have the value. You don't want to be getting ripped off by the juice. So, and then that brings us to the end here. That brings us to the pick. And it's tough based on implied probability at plus 480, Adriano Moraes would have about a 17% chance of beating Demetrious Johnson. And, you know, even though those true odds for Moraes to win are far greater than actually 17%, the market is still seeing Mighty Mouse lined at some books at like minus 800, and he's still continuing to take money. So, you know, underdog backers who have handicapped Moraes to win should take what they can get on a fighter who has never been an underdog in his career, let alone an underdog of plus 450 or plus 480, wherever he's at. At the same time, if you're coming to this from a value betting perspective, even if you think Demetrious Johnson's going to win, and you've gotten to the point now where, you know, you have to bet the other side just because of value. You got to also get the best of the line, and all signs are pointing to this is going to get juicier and juicier because if Moraes is still sitting at approaching that buy price that we're looking at 7-1 odds, and Demetrious Johnson is sitting at minus 790 and still taking money, you got to sit back and wait because you'll probably be able to get a better line on the dog as the books try to adjust. They want to set that line if it gets to a point where they're overexposed that they won't be able to take any more money on Demetrious Johnson. And then they're going to force, based on the way that the VIG goes, they're going to force the value on the side of the underdog to try to get some money on the dog to try to get some two-way action. And, with all that being said, it's tough to say that there is even that much handle on this fight that's, kind of relatively unknown for the non-diehards, in my opinion. So, yeah, I would say if you're on Moraes, you would sit back and wait a little bit and see if you can get the best of the line. I would say the buy price would be at 7-1 odds. And I'm not saying that Adriano Moraes has only a 12.5% chance of winning this fight. What I'm saying is, based on where the line was before and where it is now, and based on some market indicators that we see, that this line should go up again. And if it goes up again, you're getting a better line than you would be now. And it's like buying a TV. You might want to buy the TV, but if it goes on sale, you're going to get a better price. So you might as well wait a little bit. But otherwise, if you're on the Demetrious Johnson side, you'll have to get a little bit creative to find a wager that's available because you don't want to buy too expensive of a TV. You don't want to buy a priced out money line. And the betting options on this fight are very limited with no decision or stoppage props on the board. So it is what it is. You're going to have to either pass, or I think, one of the spot with the most value based on implied probability versus true odds, I think, is the over 2.5 at minus 255, especially if you're handicapping this fight to go towards Demetrious Johnson. I think that he has, a lot higher of a chance to win this fight by decision. And I feel like the longer the fight goes, the more that it'll be in his favor. Whereas Moraes' window, I feel, is earlier in the fight to get a stoppage, even though a lot of his fights have gone over the total as of late. I still feel like that he's got to capitalize on the early he's just got to capitalize on that early spot in the first like 2 rounds of this fight. And beyond that, if you're on Johnson, I would say do not bet the money line because it's definitely priced out. So yeah, thank you for watching, and check out SparkSports.ca for a ton more fight betting content. We're going to be doing Bellator 256, UFC on ABC2, and we're going to keep going. So yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for watching, and talk to you later.